The morning was quiet on the Althorp Estate. Mist sat on the water. Nobody spoke. A small team stood at the edge of a private lake in Northamptonshire, England, and waited for a boat to carry them to a small island in the middle of it. On that island was a grave. They had not come to mourn. They had come because something was buried inside the chamber that had been waiting 27 years to be found. And the people who wanted it destroyed had come very close to making sure no one ever got there. They almost succeeded. This is what happened when they opened the tomb of Princess Diana. And why nothing about the royal family will ever look quite the same again. To understand why this moment matters so completely, you have to go back to September of 1997. The world had just watched the most public funeral in living memory. 1 billion people. Flowers piled so deep outside Kensington Palace that the smell carried for blocks. 2 young boys walking behind a coffin in front of the entire planet. And somewhere in the middle of all of that grief and chaos and overwhelming spectacle, while cameras pointed at princes and crowds wept in the streets, one person moved quietly and did exactly what Diana had asked them to do. They placed something inside that burial chamber that was not on any official record. Nobody saw. Nobody asked. And for 27 years, nobody looked. Diana had known she was going to die. She had said it out loud, to more than one person, more than once. She had looked people in the eyes and told them she would not see 1998. And instead of collapsing under that knowledge, she had done something extraordinary. She had built a record, methodically, quietly, with help from one trusted person inside her household whose name has never appeared in any newspaper and who is believed to still be alive today. She built a sealed record of everything she had witnessed, everything she had survived, and everything she needed the world to eventually know. And then she put it somewhere the palace could never touch it. She put it underground. With her. Harry had known about the hidden items for years. Someone who was present at the original burial in 1997, someone who stood on that island and watched his mother be laid to rest, had told him at some point after he was grown. There were things inside the chamber that had never been listed. Sealed items. Items Diana had arranged herself. And one of them had his name on it in her handwriting. Think about what it means to carry that knowledge. Harry lost his titles. He lost his home. He lost his brother. He lost his country. The palace stripped away one thing after another, and every single morning he woke up knowing that his mother's last words to him were sitting underground in England, completely out of reach. In 2023, something shifted. King Charles had taken the throne, and almost immediately the palace began making noise about Althorp, the Spencer family estate where Diana is buried. They started raising questions under British heritage property laws about whether the estate was being maintained to the required standard. It was a legal nudge. A quiet one. But Earl Spencer understood exactly what it meant. If the palace could establish any official foothold over that property, even on paper, even a small one, Diana's grave stopped being untouchable. Spencer also knew there was a legal window closing. A specific period under British law during which documents found at a private burial site on private land could be locked in permanently as Spencer family property, with full legal protection. Once that window shut, those protections would weaken, enough that the palace could challenge them. And then Harry's letter arrived. It was formal correspondence from a legal team in California. It landed at Althorp on a cold morning and Spencer stood there holding it for a long time before he opened it. When he did, he understood exactly what Harry was asking. And he understood why it had to happen now. So they went in. The estate was closed the night before. Most regular staff were sent home with no explanation. The people who stayed had all agreed, without being asked twice, to say nothing afterward. A preservation team. Structural engineers. A single photographer whose job was to document every step for historical record. Earl Spencer was there. William arrived at some point during the operation. Harry was thousands of miles away in California, watching on a video link, connected to a screen that showed him his mother's grave being opened for the first time since the day she was buried. They crossed the water before dawn. The lake was still. When the burial chamber finally became visible, everyone went quiet. Not on any instruction. Nobody gave an order to stop. They just stopped. Sources who were present described the silence as lasting several minutes. It was not exactly the silence of grief. It was heavier than that. It was the silence of people who had just crossed a threshold that could not be uncrossed. The chamber had held far better than expected. Diana's casket was intact. The preservation inside had protected everything, And when the team finished their structural work and pulled out the original 1997 burial records to match each item, they found something immediately. The record did not match. There were items that should not have been there. Items not listed in any document the funeral home had ever filed. Someone had placed them there deliberately in the hours surrounding the burial, using the chaos of grief and the overwhelming scale of the public ceremony as cover. Diana had planned it down to the last detail. The first thing that stopped everyone cold was a cassette tape, hidden inside a book that had been placed among the burial items in a way that drew no attention at all. The tape held Diana's voice. Not the composed, carefully presented version the world had seen in interviews. Something else entirely. She sounded like a woman who had stopped sleeping, stopped trusting, stopped waiting for anyone to come. Her voice was steady, but what lived underneath it was not steady at all. The contents of that recording have not been disclosed. One source described the silence after the tape ended as the most painful moment of the entire morning. The second discovery was a photograph. A single photograph of a person, face down. On the back, in Diana's handwriting, was a date and 2 words. Nobody in the room identified the person in the photograph. Earl Spencer picked it up, looked at it for a long moment, and secured it immediately. Nobody asked him to explain. There are some things that even the people present understood were not theirs to ask about. The third discovery was a child's drawing. Small, simple. The kind a young boy makes for his mother and she keeps forever. It was believed to be William's. But when someone turned it over, there was a note on the back in Diana's handwriting. And the note was not addressed to William. It was addressed to someone else. Someone Diana had expected to be standing in that chamber when the time came. She had thought it through. She had anticipated who was coming. She had written directly to that person and made sure they would know, the moment they held it, that she had known they were coming. And then there was the rosary. The one given to Diana by Mother Teresa, listed in the original 1997 records. Expected. But during the examination, sources close to the estate indicate that Diana had concealed something inside it, something small enough to have gone completely unnoticed during the original burial preparations. When it was found, it caused the longest silence of the entire operation. Longer than when the chamber first opened. Earl Spencer asked the technical team to step back after that. The engineers, the preservation specialists, the photographer, all of them moved away. What came next was for family only. Inside that chamber, alone with everything their mother had left them, were the people Diana had loved most in her life. And there were letters. One for William. One for Harry. One for Earl Spencer. And other sealed envelopes addressed to names the Spencer family has chosen, for now, to protect. Diana wrote to William about his future as king. About the weight of it. The loneliness of it. About their family, about Charles, about specific things she had witnessed from inside a household that presented itself to the world as one thing while being something entirely different behind closed doors. She did not write with rage. She wrote with a clear-eyed, heartbreaking sadness that was, by every account, harder to read than anger would have been. Whatever she wrote directly contradicted the version of events William had spent his adult life defending. He did not speak for hours after reading it. Nobody pushed him. Harry's letter was different. It was urgent. Raw. Diana knew Harry would carry her loss in a way that could tear him apart, and she went straight at it. She told him without softening, without royal restraint, that he was loved. Not as a prince. Not as the spare. As her son. As the boy she had watched the world try to fit into a shape he was never made for. And then she told him something else. Sources indicate that Diana's letter told Harry clearly that if the institution became something destroying him, he needed to leave. That his survival as a person mattered more than his role inside a family that had already broken her. That walking away from something that was killing him was not weakness. Harry left. He lost everything the palace could strip away. He was called a traitor. A disgrace. And somewhere in California, watching his mother's grave open on a screen, his hands shaking, he read a letter that told him he had done exactly what she would have wanted. Now here is where everything becomes something else entirely. The world had known since 2003 about the letter Diana had written predicting her death in a car crash. Her butler Paul Burrell had revealed it. The palace had spent years building their response. It was devastating, but it was manageable. What nobody knew was that there was a second letter. More specific. More detailed. It named additional individuals. It described specific threats Diana had received in the months before Paris. It included dates, names, and documented incidents that had never appeared in any public record or formal inquiry in 27 years. Legal experts who have been briefed on its existence have said with great care that this document alone contains enough specific information to trigger formal calls for a completely new investigation into how Diana died. The first letter told the world she was afraid. The second letter told the world exactly why. And exactly who. Diana also documented something deeply personal. Among everything she preserved was a handwritten account of a pregnancy nobody had ever known about, and a miscarriage she had carried alone, in complete silence, because the man was not Charles. She grieved it without a single shoulder to lean on. She buried that loss so deep inside herself that the world never saw even a trace of it. And she wrote down the name of the father. That document is now in the hands of the Spencer family. Camilla knew before Charles did. In the hours between the tomb opening and any formal palace briefing, Camilla's people were already making calls. Frantic ones. Diana had documented incidents involving Camilla that went far beyond the affair the public already knew about. Specific incidents. Dated. The kind that were very difficult to dismiss. And Camilla had always known those records existed. She had just never known where. Diana wrote about the isolation Camilla had helped engineer. The trusted staff who disappeared around her one at a time. The new faces who watched too carefully and said too little. A campaign, Diana called it. She wrote that word and underlined it. And then she wrote that the loneliness had hurt more than anything else they had done to her. More than the betrayal. More than the humiliation. The loneliness. Charles, when informed, did not react like a grieving former husband. He reacted like a man whose threat management system of 27 years had just stopped working. He had always believed the grave would never be opened. He had made his calculations based on that assumption. He was wrong about every single one of them. The palace explored every legal angle, every possible challenge, every mechanism the crown could use to suppress what had been found. And they kept running into the same answer. Spencer land, Spencer family, Spencer legal ownership. Diana had not just prepared those documents. She had placed them in the one location in England where the palace had the least possible power to reach them. She had thought it through completely. She had loaded the weapon carefully. And she had left it somewhere she knew they could never get to it. What happens now is not yet decided. William wants privacy. The reasons for that are complicated and painful and do not make them right or wrong. Harry wants the full truth to be heard, his mother's voice without the palace deciding which parts of it are acceptable. Earl Spencer has said nothing. He is sitting on all of it. Patient. Unhurried. The palace cannot force his hand. Diana gave him no deadline. Whatever Spencer decides will shape Diana's legacy more completely than anything that has happened in the 27 years since her death. If he releases everything, the institution faces the most serious challenge to its public story since Diana looked into a BBC camera and told the truth about her marriage live on television. If he seals it again, her most detailed and specific truth waits another generation. There is no good outcome for the crown. Diana made sure of that. She had planned everything. The placement. The timing. The legal protection. The letters addressed to the people she knew would be standing in that chamber. The cassette tape. The photograph. The hidden item inside the rosary from Mother Teresa. She had thought about every piece of it in her final months while the world watched her at charity events and polo matches and thought she looked beautiful. She had built a weapon in silence. And then she had waited, 27 years underground, for someone brave enough to fire it. The question is no longer whether the world will hear what Diana left behind. The question is when. And which parts of it Spencer decides to let out first. What do you believe he should do with it? Leave your thoughts below. And if this kind of history is what you come here for, you already know what to do.